It's Monday, November 18th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. It is a hell of a day to talk ball because, man, Week 11 was awesome. Week 11 was fantastic. This whole Sunday was great. We had great games in every single window, and we're going to get to all of that here on the Sunday recap show because Andy Behrens is going to join, and we're going to dive into the entire Sunday slate. But before we do that, as we always do, we're going to start with the solo recap here. And man, we have a pretty wild game to recap. Chargers 34, Bengals 27. We're not going to run through this kind of care, don't care style that we usually do here. I'm just going to try to talk about the two teams here. And let's start with the Chargers because I feel like if we go care, don't care style like how I usually do for my recap column, you guys can check that out. I'll bring up some of the points from it, but I don't know that it's really going to do what we just watched justice because that was a wild ride. But what I come away from this on the Chargers side thinking is, I think this is a contender. I really do. I've been talking about the Chargers a lot on Football 301 and this podcast too, that I'm really a big fan of what I've seen from both sides of the ball here. And, you know, obviously it's Jim Harbaugh and it's the change of the culture and all that stuff. You know, this is the type of game that the Chargers lose in the past. I know I'm not the first person to say that, but it just really was the fact that this game did not end in a disappointing Chargers loss. I really do think this is a very good test case for why this team is different, why the 2024 version of the Chargers is not the same old cursed group that we've known previously. You know, for one reason or another, usually volatility and the way that this team operates actually contributed to them losing these games in the past. And I would say that volatility is actually what got them to win this game. And I would say like a couple different reasons. One, defensively, you know, Jesse Minter, I think, has been great all season long. And it was not, you know, the name of the game here was not shut down Joe Burrow for 4 quarters. I think if you ask Jesse Minter and the boys in this, in this game going into it, I don't think they would have said, hey, the plan is we're going to shut down Joe Burrow like we've done many of the other lesser, my words, not theirs, lesser quarterbacks that we've seen on our schedule. That's just not going to happen. Instead, we got several timely pressures. We got tight coverages. We got some critical stops late in the game that kind of kept the dam from breaking as the Bengals offense tried to mount that final assault. And it's no better descripted here than they hit Joe Burrow 13 times in this game, most among quarterbacks in Week 11, despite the fact they blitzed him on just 14% of the dropbacks. Some of the stuff that they threw him in on the back end really complicated the picture up front. And again, it was critical moments, the defense getting those stops. That's defense in today's NFL. You're not going to go up against one of the great quarterbacks of the league and you're going to just shut them down for 4 quarters. For the most part, that doesn't happen. If the Chargers go to the playoffs, I think they're going to go to the playoffs. When they're there, they're not going to just stop Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson or whoever, Russell Wilson. Haha, funny. They're not going to stop those guys for 4 quarters. So you're going to have to lean into some of that volatility. And I think that's just such a good way to describe this Chargers defense compared to the units that were under the previous coaching staff, which was much more passive and much more like, let's just try to prevent big plays. You're going to give up big plays, but you get stops in big moments. That's the name of the game. And on the offensive side here for the Chargers, which is obviously what you care about, fantasy podcast, for God's sakes, I think the fantasy community missed on the Chargers offense because and look, I talked about this Chargers offense being a little bit higher on this group than maybe consensus was. I got a lot of stuff wrong. I get stuff wrong all the time. But one of the reasons that I liked this version of the Chargers offense heading into this year, maybe more than consensus, was I think that the fantasy community missed on this Chargers offense because they were worried and obsessed with like the lack of volume because of the coaching change. Oh, you know, Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman, they're going to want to run the ball more. And even if you didn't, and I think a lot of people did, you know, go to the extreme here, like, oh, they're going to run the offense the same way they ran it under damn Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick and even early career Lamar Jackson. There was no way that was going to happen. That has not been how it's happened here for the Chargers. But the biggest thing that people missed on is that a lot of that volume under the previous coaching staff was just a bunch of empty calories bull. Period. End of story. Like pace for pace's sake, underneath passes and, little dink and dunk in the pursuit of efficiency. And like this stuff kills me about offenses today. Like, oh, great. High completion percentage, all this stuff. Who cares? You're not a dangerous offense. There were so many times during the previous coaching staff, multiple coordinators, that Justin Herbert, one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league, did not feel like a dangerous quarterback. In this offense, he feels like a dangerous quarterback. And it wasn't clean for 4 quarters tonight. There's no question about that. But that's okay. It's okay. You can lean into that volatility as we're talking about here with this team. Herbert coming into this game had the highest yards per completion mark of his career. He completes 17 passes tonight and gets 297 yards. I would guess that average is going to go up. 12.9 air yards per attempt for Herbert. Led all quarterbacks in week 11. How many times have you said that about a Justin Herbert offense in the last 5 years? Not very often. And anybody who was watching this team closely, and I was watching this team closely over the last few years, knew how frustrating that felt. So I find this version of the Chargers offense to be a welcome relief. Herbert also continues to scramble more, which is accessing a higher fantasy upside. 66 yards off scrambles, led all quarterbacks. That's great to see. Again, new dimension for this star quarterback. And we're seeing so many players get unlocked in the passing game too. I mean, Ladd McConkey is a superstar. I think this game, this moment on Sunday Night Football should be the moment that everybody agrees, like, this is the statement game. This is the arrival moment for Ladd McConkey, who was just absolutely electric in this game. Led the team in targets again, went over 100 yards, and he did it doing the stuff that makes him, I think, a truly special talent, which is, yeah, he's a slot receiver, but he is stinging teams on downfield routes. Big boy stuff, especially on that final game-winning drive. 2 just huge downfield receptions for Ladd McConkey. This guy's great. Okay, I don't want to hear about him in start sit debates anymore. This is a guy you should be playing every single week. I think he is on this superstar trajectory. I could not be higher on Ladd McConkey. If you have not checked out the reception perception in season rookie report, you'll see why I'm so high on this guy. I really big fan of his game. But we're also seeing guys like Quentin Johnston and Will Dissly, guys who are probably just role players, but they are accessing unforeseen quality reps that we don't normally get out of guys like this. So honestly, everything about the 2024 Chargers feels different. Feels like the ghosts of the franchise past have been exorcised. Jim Harbaugh's changed the culture. They're leaning into volatility. Herbert is accessing a new ceiling. I'm very high on this Chargers team. I think they're a real deal contender going forward. And tonight was only a big affirmation of that. I didn't save a lot of time for the Bengals here because, Bengals are painful. Honestly, at this point, the Bengals right now, a lot of ground to make up for in the playoff, in the wild card race, and losing this game to the Chargers, who probably will make the playoffs, not gonna be a good sign there for them. And this is one they should have won. Even if there were moments where the Chargers looked like the better team, they let this one slip away, and it's painful because. T. Higgins is out there. He's absolutely smoking off coverage, 130 yards and a touchdown against off coverage, according to Next Gen Stats, because they're using these hard doubles on Jamar Chase. So Higgins has all these nice coverage looks on the other side, and he takes advantage of it. It's a reminder of what could have been had Higgins been healthy all year. When he's healthy, yeah, he can be this guy. When he's out there, you're playing him every single week in fantasy, but he leaves such a cavernous hole when he's not out there. And that's so problematic because, man, is he even going to be on this team next year? I like a lot of the role players. Yoshi Voss is useful. I still think at some point Jermaine Burton will give them more than what he's giving them right now if he can, just walk the straight and narrow and all that stuff. Chase Brown has been like a revelation as a check down merchant for this team. And I don't say that with anything but respect because, yeah, you need a guy out there catching 5 passes for 57 yards on 7 targets when the receivers are creating so much space in that underneath area because of the downfield coverage looks that they're going to get. So he's been a revelation. Burrow's playing great ball, even if he's getting hit a ton. But it just all feels kind of pointless because it's great for fantasy, right? The defense on the other side, all these guys on offense producing. It's great. It's great for fantasy, but it just feels pointless from the Bengals perspective because, man, they're probably not going anywhere this year. This is probably also the last dance of the Burrow, Higgins, Chase, big 3 trio or whatever. And it's coming in a year where they're probably not going to make the playoffs. It's coming in a year where, yeah, they're getting contributions from these ancillary guys, but there's also not like, this is T. Higgins' understudy. He is taking over next year. There's going to be some hard questions asked about this team. And yeah, you could find wideouts anywhere, but Higgins' specific dimension, which, we don't have time to go through the whole thing and like why I think he brings something different alongside Chase and the whole combo and all that stuff. We don't have time to do that on this recap. We got a lot of other stuff to get to. But it's not just like easily replicable. You just pluck that out of anywhere in the NFL draft. So yeah, it's great for fantasy. This is one of the carnivals of the year. Shout out Scott Pianowski term there. That's who the Bengals are. But unfortunately, I think that's kind of all that the Bengals are, which does feel a little disappointing considering that we might be at the end of something that's been really enjoyable here for Cincinnati. But Chargers are a contender. The Bengals are probably not. And we got a lot of other stuff to get to here, okay? Week 11 was great. So many big games in every single window. So let's move on. Let's get to the rest of the show with Andy Behrens. Here we go. Joining us now, as he always does here on the Sunday Recap, it is my good buddy, Andy Behrens. Andy, what an electric Sunday of football here in Week 11.
Yeah, my initial reaction is just that was a pretty sick day. That was a pretty awesome day of football. I feel like I should have a lot of mea culpas. I feel like I got a lot of stuff wrong coming into this week. In particular, the idea that, I don't know, sometimes, man, we get into one of these like old rivalry games, division rivalry games, and they find a way to make it messy, even when the numbers on paper say that it shouldn't be messy. But like every great rivalry game today was glorious. We had a bunch of late exciting finishes. We had a bunch of results flip in the final minute. I don't know. Today was awesome.
Oh, who cares about what you got wrong, buddy? I mean, listen, you're going to get stuff wrong in this business every single week, every single day. If you're not getting things wrong, you're not trying. And, that's going to happen. Everybody is the reality of it. The teams get stuff wrong, okay? If the teams get things wrong, those of us talking about the teams are going to get things wrong. I could not. That is not the energy I want you starting this podcast with, Andy, because what a great Sunday of football, especially again after some people on the internet. I love when I can just point to some people on the internet are saying, having these meta conversations about, is the product of the NFL actually down? Are the games not that good this year? Is quarterback play on the decline? You get some pretty incredible performances by quarterbacks from all levels of the sport. You get some pretty electric games here. Let's waste no more time. Let's get into it. Let's get into the Week 11 recap here, Andy. And as we always do, we're going to break things into 3 sections. We're going to start with the games we really care about, the games we sort of care about in section number 2, and the final section, the games that could have been an email. And I will say, for an electric Sunday, there's some weird ass results that we'll talk about in the final section. So we'll see how much time we can save for that one. Let's get right into the games we really care about. And that is, we got to start with Bills 30, Chiefs 21. Andy Behrens, a much hyped game, not division rival, but a rivalry game for sure. Absolutely delivered here. Let's start with the Bills, who come away with a win in this one. What'd you see from them today?
I saw one of the absolute plays of the year from Josh Allen late in this game, right? Like that closing touchdown. Just an absolutely thrilling play, and he could have been dropped behind the line of scrimmage, and to score from that situation, it felt like one of those moments where there's a bunch of places where you could have like just sort of screenshot it and been like, can you believe he scores from this predicament? It was just, he was phenomenal. And it was a good reminder that, Josh Allen in a bad matchup against a good defense, with multiple receivers, dinged or out, you got to play him. Because he still finishes with he wasn't perfect today. Mm-hmm. It still finishes with a rushing score, passing score, over 50 rushing yards. He was awesome. I mean, this game, as it does every year, it just felt like prelude, right? Like we are surely going to get this again. I don't know what this game means anymore to Bills fans, honestly. Like I do a regular radio thing in Rochester, and they kind of have the same vibe where like, yeah, I mean, what does another regular season win against the Chiefs really mean to us? But it was it's friggin' exciting. It seemed like it was pretty electric in the building. It was just a great game. Phenomenal performance by Allen. Obviously, Shakir was good. We knew he was going to have to step up. Pretty quiet day from Dawson Knox in what I was hoping would be more of a blow up spot, but who cares? This was an awesome game. James Cook finds the end zone a couple times, finds a way to, I'm looking at the box score. I'm just bringing up the box score for the first time. James Cook only finishes with 20 rushing yards on 9 attempts, does score a couple of touchdowns, so it's a nice fantasy day. I don't think any running back has gone over 60 rushing yards against the Chiefs yet this year, which is fantastic. I mean, that's just a great defense. These are just two great teams that hopefully we're going to see again later in January.
Yeah, you'd imagine that we will see them again. And I love the way you frame that of what does this really mean for Bills fans? Just because, look, it is obviously what matters is the rest of the season. This will matter for, the power rankings makers and things like that. And I do think it's a really good proof of concept of what this Bills team is, which is a really, really good team. They've not been perfect. They weren't perfect necessarily in this game. You're right. Josh Allen wasn't perfect in this game. But they've just been able to throw a lot at you from an offensive perspective. And even today when their run game wasn't working, I thought they really got, a lot done in the passing game, and it's still without, Amari Cooper, who wasn't a full-time player in this one. The full, route participation data is not all the way updated, but he wasn't on the field for every single snap or anything like that. He had one absolutely critical downfield catch, but it was kind of as we expected. It's guys like, Khalil Shakir obviously leading 8 for 12 for Khalil Shakir. What are we doing? Like we're really falling off the
like
catch
his first game of the year. Yeah,
right. But still, he was awesome. That one third down catch that he made, which he just took an absolute shot on. He's such a cool player to watch. I mean, I've waited long enough to say Curtis Samuel's name. I mean, Curtis Samuel was pretty electric in this game as well. Yep. So this is just what the Bills offense is they are now, if Samuel's healthy, and I think he looked great even when he wasn't getting the ball, he seemed like he was open on a lot of these plays. If Samuel's healthy now after coming into the year with a turf toe injury, which, turf toe sucks. Like turf toe basically ruined large chunks of like Terry McLaurin's season last year. That's how much a turf toe can dog a player. And then Samuel picked up another injury. If he's healthy now, if Shakir's out there, and we still don't have Keon Coleman out there, we still, I think, probably don't have a 100% Amari Cooper at this point. Dalton Kincaid doesn't play in this game. Pretty scary that they can go in and beat a team that was previously undefeated in Kansas City, mostly because of what the offense did here. And I think that's a pretty scary proposition for this Bills offense.
I'm really glad that you mentioned Amari Cooper's performance, because if you were worried specifically about the hand injury, the wrist injury, he made just an absolutely sick, like sideline one-handed catch in this game that I think was with the bad hand. So like we can still worry about him adjusting to the offense and learning on the fly and all that. But I thought, physically he looked better than I expected him to. I thought that was really great. On both sides of this game, you can point to who's not there and say, okay, when we get some guys back, it's going to be different. These are just great teams. And they were kind of throwing haymakers on Sunday. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, especially on Buffalo's side, just getting those guys activated is pretty fantastic. Let's talk about Kansas City here, though. And I mean, what a Chiefs passing game distribution this is. Nobody has more than 5 targets. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 players with targets in this game from Patrick Mahomes on his 33 pass attempts. You mentioned it, obviously, Kareem Hunt. This might be his last dance as the Chiefs RB1. We're probably getting Isaiah Pacheco back here within the next few weeks. He managed to not score on his goal line rush, which eventually became Noah Gray's second touchdown. So what stood out here from you? I'll actually start this off. I would say some nice moments from Xavier Worthy to start this game, but still, I think, and of course I got a couple tweets about it, like, oh, you talking about Xavier Worthy, and then he's having this big game, and then he goes like completely quiet after everybody on planet Earth tweets me about it. So still not a complete player. They still don't have DeAndre Hopkins. I definitely thought this would be a bigger game for DeAndre Hopkins. It wasn't. They just spread this thing around as usual, and there were definitely some times where the offense felt like it lacked a little bit of juice.
Yeah, for sure. It felt early on like they were just going to build the whole game plan, or they had built the whole game plan out of Xavier Worthy, and then that just kind of dried up. He had that one moment where it was I don't know the yardage on it, but it should have been a long completion, and he didn't get his feet in, and it was he was alone, and really should have got his feet in, and that's just like got to go to receiver finishing school, I guess, right? Like that's just some of the development that is still ahead for Xavier Worthy. He's still obviously an electric athlete, crazy fast, fits the type that the Chiefs fall in love with, right? All these sort of gimmicky niche players who have physical skills that are unlike a lot of other guys. So I brought up the box score, and you're so right. It's everybody has 2 to 5 targets. Nobody's really getting peppered. If they have like 3 non-Kelsey tight ends, or tight end like people who just like every time the ball goes their way, I merge them into one. So it felt like that guy, that Voltron tight end, got like 10 targets, but no, they were distributed among other people apparently. This is another one of those games where, and I don't mean to be super disrespectful of Kareem Hunt's game, but there is just not a lot of make you miss there, and he's not going to run through people, right? Like you can arm tackle Kareem Hunt in a way that you can't arm tackle Isaiah Pacheco, and there are just some yards to be had for someone of Isaiah Pacheco's skill set that are not available to Kareem Hunt. And I do feel like that could have been a bit of a difference maker in this one. Whatever. Great game. Fun game. Mahomes throws a couple of picks. One of them was on him. One of them was just like a, final 4th down, last drive desperation throw to Kelsey that gets picked off. So I don't, whatever. He doesn't reach 200 passing yards, but he does throw 3 touchdowns. This game was a blast. I liked it both ways. It seemed like everybody came out healthy. I hope that Shakir got absolutely drilled, as you mentioned before. I hope he's okay. I hope everybody else walked away from this okay.
Yeah, and I mean there were some great performances on the defensive side of the football for both teams as well. I mean these are 2 of the better defenses in the league too. Like yes, they're maybe the first and second best quarterback in the NFL. Definitely, Mahomes I think is still whatever. He's still the best quarterback in the league. I think Allen is probably there at second or third, depending on who you ask. And but at the same time, like these are 2 really tough defenses to play against, and you felt that at times. That's why it was such a good football game. I will say, just before we depart this game and transition to the next one, because it does kind of give us a smooth moment. If this ends up being like, if Josh Allen ends up winning the MVP this year, this will, I think, be the moment where the tide turned, because obviously Lamar and the Ravens lose to a divisional opponent. Not that I think that was all Lamar Jackson's fault. Again, we're going to talk about that game here in just a second, but that was definitely, I mean, producer Collins messaged me as soon as it happened he's like, that's Josh Allen's MVP moment on that game-winning touchdown there. And, maybe it ends up being that way. It certainly was a signature moment in his season for a guy that, again, he had that one game against the Texans where, it looked like, I joked that the API wasn't updating because his statistics were so bad. But there was definitely a lot of moments where he has elevated everybody around him. I think this was the encapsulation of that, of him elevating all of these different playmakers on offense. So certainly if he ends up winning the award, this will be one of the moments you point to.
Yeah, and if he wins the award, I think part of the case is going to be that we're going to look at this receiving core, and we're going to say, man, he had the usual Josh Allen season, and he did it without Steph Diggs and without, somebody who in our minds is just like a complete, absolute wide receiver one, no question about it. But I mean, he's running it back, putting up numbers again, and is probably going to finish with a season that looks very much like all of the other Josh Allen seasons that could have won MVP awards, right? And again, if he does it in these circumstances with a signature moment like he gave us today, you can make the argument right now.
Let's transition to that next game. Steelers 18, Ravens 16, and Andy, I told you, bro. I told you this was going to happen. Did I not warn you? I won't say I told you so, but did I not warn you that this was hanging over us? Like that, okay, yes, everything's set up for a big offensive explosion, but this is still Steelers-Ravens, and somehow it's going to be low scoring, and we might even get a weird-looking score here, too. And I would say 18-16 certainly counts as one.
Yeah, I think when this is like my top storyline that I talked about in the Sunday edition of FFL, and I did give lip service to the fact that we often expect a super weird low score from a game like this. And I think I threw out like 16-15 or 16-14 or something like that. And we
in the
damn
neighborhood.
near hit it.
In the neighborhood.
18-16 definitely qualifies as a weird low score in these circumstances. Again, Baltimore entered this thing having just been viciously carved up by every team that has faced them through the air, like league's worst pass defense. It's set up so well. Like George Pickens was still fine. He still put up numbers, not exactly what you expected, but we never got, we didn't get a touchdown pass from Russell Wilson. They probably left some opportunities out there. Super fun game. I thought Najee Harris was great, by the way, in a difficult matchup against a tough run defense. I thought Najee looked really, really good. Tough running there, over 80, maybe over 90 scrimmage yards in that one. So he was really good. This is a fun game. Frickin' Boswell handles all the scoring for Pittsburgh. Multiple people reached out to say, "Oh, hey, you got to give Chris Boswell a special award at the end of the pod. I know you love kickers, so I'm doing it now. I'm not waiting until the end. Let's talk about 6 field goals from the Pittsburgh legend. That was great. Rough, I don't know. Like Lamar still scored fantasy wise. It was still an okay rushing day for him. Still threw a touchdown pass. Roller coaster day for Zay Flowers. Had one hit him in the face, in the chest, or whatever, and bounce away. But he did deliver a touchdown. I'm wandering all over the place here, but I think one of my favorite stats about any member of the Ravens is that Mark Andrews has never scored a touchdown against Pittsburgh in the regular season. This is like 10 or 11 career games too, and he's never gotten home against the Steelers. That's wild to me.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy. And obviously Isaiah Likely comes back and is the most productive pass catcher with 75 yards for the Baltimore Ravens. And a couple of pretty sick catches there for Isaiah Likely as well. But I do want to talk about Steelers here first, because here's where I think this golden matchup for them against a Ravens defense that has been really, it's weird, right? Because even the big play that George Pickens, his 37-yarder that he caught against Brandon Stevens, was like a great example of what's gone wrong with this defense this year. Brandon Stevens, like, he just has had issues at the catch point this season. Like, I've been watching a lot of receivers against this Ravens defense lately, and like, you see the coverage actually it's not as, like, they definitely blow coverages for sure. There's sometimes guys just, like, communication issues, especially in the intermediate area of the field though. But downfield,
one guy handing off a guy to another, right? That often blows up for the Ravens. Yeah.
And a lot of it is like Roquan Smith, who just hasn't been the same player in coverage this year that he's been in previous seasons. So that has actually been the bigger issue, whereas opposed to like the cornerback play on the perimeter where Pittsburgh wants to thrive. It's just that these guys, like Stevens specifically, but some of the other cornerbacks as well, have had issues tracking the ball. So in that moment, Russell Wilson throws one of those go routes to George Pickens, and it looks like he could have just walked down the field and like plopped it right into his hands. But the problem is, where the Ravens have been so vulnerable with some of these communication issues and the linebackers and things like that, it's over the intermediate middle of the field. And the Steelers just have nothing over the intermediate middle of the field because it's a Russell Wilson passing offense. So, and this was a great example of this today, because Next Gen Stats has this, that Russell Wilson was most effective on passes under 10 air yards in the Steelers win over the Ravens, going 20 of 24 on such passes. And that's kind of like the thing here is, you see Najee Harris with 4 catches. You see Jaylen Warren with 4 catches. You see Darnell Washington, my freaking guy, Darnell Washington, 2 catches in this game too for 42 yards. It's a lot of these like quick flat routes or check downs to the running backs. And if that's what's available to the offense, if they don't get the haymakers down the field to George Pickens or Mike Williams, who is not available, is not present in this game at all. So, that's sort of just where I think the matchup like fell apart here for in retrospect, like diagnosing kind of what happened just watching the game on Sunday, and really sort of why like the Russell Wilson streaming play, which I made myself in a couple of spots, or why George Pickens like didn't absolutely go off here.
Yeah, the first thing that sticks out to me, and this is not actionable in any sort of fantasy way at all, Darnell Washington is huge, and I always have this moment of, is that a lineman? What is that? He is just an extraordinarily large human being. And it never looks right when he's catching a pass. That's wild. Again, it's only 1 or 2 each game, but it's delightful every time. And I go through the same thought process. In hindsight, I definitely should have seen the the issue coming, where like the actual vulnerability of the Ravens defense has not necessarily been, 30 yards downfield on the perimeter where Pickens is best operating, where a Mike Williams can operate, whatever. It is exactly the throws that Russell Wilson didn't make at all last year, and is a bit lighter on this season. Even though I think the passing choices for Russell Wilson this year have been different than last year, and it's looked different, and it's looked more like a passing offense ought to. But it is a much more challenging area of the field in which he is forced to operate. That is, but man, this is just a really fun game, and it was always, this thing was a 1-score game throughout. Just a great rivalry, probably the chapter that should have been written today in this rivalry, even though I was expecting, I don't know what I was expecting, 33-28, something a little livelier than 34 total points.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, for whatever reason, and I don't really have the reason for this off the top of my head on a Sunday, but Lamar Jackson has just struggled against the Steelers throughout the majority of his career. And I mean, it's a great defense. They have some really great players over there, and there's a lot of familiarity, of course, as well. I thought Lamar had some great moments in this game. I also thought there were some moments that he's probably going to want back, some misses downfield. But then, like you mentioned, Zay Flowers has one of those classic drops where he was thinking about what he was going to do with it before he actually finished the catch on that final drive. Obviously they don't get the 2-point conversion there. So, it is funny because it's a disappointing game for the Ravens, but Derrick Henry still has the 31-yard run. He has the touchdown. So I don't know. Do you feel any differently about Baltimore coming out of this game, or is this just one of those? I mean, well, I will say this. I mean, they're not in control of the division anymore. That's obviously going to be Pittsburgh. I do think we got to stop talking about Pittsburgh as some little like gimmick or whatever, because they're just a damn good football team, and the Ravens have some clear and obvious flaws. Even if Pittsburgh wasn't always able to capitalize on those on defense in this one, they have some clear and obvious flaws. Do you feel any differently about Baltimore coming out of this one, or is it just like weird rivalry game and it is?
That's a great question. And I have not been. I feel like there are voices out there who, every time Baltimore puts up a big number, will tell you, oh, this Ravens team feels different. This Ravens team is probably the best in the AFC, one of the best in the AFC. I haven't really felt that way all year because this Ravens team has always allowed opponents back into games. There's been a little bit of that. It's not the same Ravens defense. Defense did show up against Pittsburgh, but this has not been the same Ravens defense. They have some clear vulnerabilities. They've given up huge numbers. So I definitely feel like this might be the best version of Lamar that we've seen through, 3/4 of a season, but it doesn't mean that I feel like this is the best version of the Ravens that we've seen in recent years necessarily. So I don't feel a whole lot different. Like, losing this game was definitely within the range of possible outcomes for Baltimore this season. They've played some opponents who should not have been in games with them much closer than it needed to be, and lost some of those games. Like, this felt like an appropriate Ravens loss to me. I don't think they're where the I'm hesitant to say that they're not where the Chiefs and Bills are. I don't think they're where the Lions are. I don't think they're quite at that level yet.
Yeah, I think I generally feel the same way as you do on that one. All right, let's move on to another big divisional game here. Seahawks 20, 49ers 17. What a finish by Geno Smith, who takes in his own rushing score on a day that Geno certainly was not perfect. He had the interception, which was just kind of a rough throw, but a lot of high level execution, I thought, by Geno throughout the course of the game. So I was kind of happy to see him get rewarded there with that game-winning touchdown. I was generally happy with what I saw out of the Seahawks offense coming out of their bye week. Andy, how did you feel about it?
One of the biggest open questions for me was going to be how DK Metcalf looked. He looked great. Finishes with 7 catches, 70 yards. He was good. Kenneth Walker was good. JSN, another really, really solid game. This was really DK and JSN and some other guys sprinkled in. I thought, this was a classic Geno game in some regards, where there was, his worst play was one of the worst throws that you saw all day. But then that didn't sync up with almost everything else that he did, right? Like, there were just, there's going to be one or two moments where, things go things go horribly wrong. And the rest of the game, I thought was mostly awesome from Geno. I can't I'm a little bit shocked that the Niners lost this guy. I shouldn't feel shocked that the Niners lost this game because it's not the first time they've lost one like this. That you felt should have been in the bag, even if it wasn't in the bag for them. What a head scratcher for them. And then, Bosa limping around a little bit on the field during this one, not a great sign. So, but overall, a super impressive win by Seattle. Keeps them, kind of keeps them in the conversation at the very least. For a playoff spot when I thought they were cooked.
Yeah, the NFC West is such a mess right now. I'm just looking at the standings.
So weird. It's so weird.
Arizona leading the division at 6-4. Take a bow, Nate Tice, on the Arizona Cardinals. Then you've got, the 5-5 bros after that between the Rams, the Seahawks, and the 49ers. And yeah, it's tough because I'm sure I picked the Niners in this game, but there's just it's weird because sometimes a team gets a bunch of injuries in the offseason, in training camp, and you're just like, man, maybe this just isn't their year, and it's, every time the 49ers play, I just kind of feel like, man, maybe this just isn't their year, and they've done so many different things here. And there's been some, fascinating storylines. And I think both, two that I would mention here are Brock Purdy as one of the most efficient scramblers in the damn NFL. Hey, he's one of the most effective guys when he just takes off and runs. That's been a funny little revelation. I don't want to say funny like I'm demeaning it, but that's been an interesting revelation and a new wrinkle to their offense this year. That was apparent in this one. He had 5 carries, 40 yards, and a touchdown. He was, again, the EPA numbers on his rush attempts are pretty crazy. And then Juwan Jennings breaking out as the team's X receiver and probably their most enjoyable offensive player to watch right now. 10 catches in this one, but it's just not enough. I mean, because no Kittle in this one. Deebo Samuel's held to 4 catches, 22 yards. Christian McCaffrey looks fine. Ayuk's obviously not out there. Yeah. He's gone for the rest of the season. Ricky Pearsall doesn't do anything in this game. So it's just, it's weird because I felt in the offseason all these injuries happening, all this weirdness happening with the team. Maybe this just isn't their year. And that's just kind of the feeling I continue to get with this team.
Yeah, Jennings catches 10 passes for 91 yards. Brock Purdy only completed 21 for 159, I want to say, right? So that's a pretty big percentage of the passing offense, and it got so Jennings just looks the part too. There was a moment in the second half of this game, I think well into the fourth quarter, where there's an over the middle opportunity to Deebo Samuel, and the throw sail's a little bit high. And Greg Olsen was like, "Oh man, I'd really like to see Juwan Jennings get that opportunity instead of Deebo." And you're like, "Wow, is that where we are?"
Right? I'm right. Yeah.
And it felt, I didn't disagree, but it's like, wow, that's where we are. We're like, oh, why are we throwing a Deebo when you got Juwan Jennings on the field? But that it did begin to feel that way. Really quiet game from Ricky Pearsall, who I thought was going to be something in this one. But he's, he played a lot of snaps in his 3 previous games. I'm sure it'll come around again to him. Everybody gets a turn in the Niners offense eventually. But man, really with Kittle out and obviously Ayuk's ongoing absence, I thought there was going to be an opportunity for Pearsall here, but no, it was they built the whole thing out of Juwan Jennings, and it felt good whenever the ball went to him. It felt really good. He only caught 10 of 11 targets. It was near perfect.
I think this JSN performance is a pretty big deal. That was going to be kind of one of the big questions in this game. He catches 10 passes, goes over 100 yards. 5 of his 10 routes on third down gained 52 yards across 4 catches, according to Next Gen Stats. All of them resulted in a first down. Tyler Lockett still runs the most routes on the team, at least according to the source that I'm looking at right now, which, wasn't as if he was just going to get removed from the offense, but it felt like what I wanted to see in this game was the JSN plays be more intentional, and I can't wait to see what, Fantasy Points' first read target stats look like from this game, because it sure felt like, all right, when we're getting JSN the ball, there's a purpose to it. It's not, all right, let's dump it off to him in the flat for, a little 7-yard completion or something. It's like, especially on the game-winning drive, there was a play where Geno Smith like adjusted the protection and then immediately gets the ball out to JSN. That was where it really felt like, okay, this is a different type of player for this offense, and we're actually designing him some downfield plays and looking to work him and DK Metcalf off of like combo routes and things like that. So more purposeful, intentional usage for JSN, and not just okay, let's design him a screen to get him the ball or something like that.
Yeah, seeing him go off in a game where we had a healthy and fully operational and productive DK Metcalf is just a huge sign for his value moving forward.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk through the games that we sort of care about right after this. All right, Andy, we're back, and we are starting the games we sort of care about with Packers 20, Bears 19. Hey, your Bears looked like they were headed towards email territory, so shout out to them for leading the games we sort of care about. Normally, I would throw to you first to react to a Bears game, but I want to present you with this reaction, and you tell me if this is on base or what. So I watched this game, and my first instinct as the kick gets blocked at the end of the game is just, my God, what an awful, an emotionally draining season for the Bears rolls on. One that I have to feel like everybody in that building just has to feel so mentally burnt out, basically, by the, combined with the Hail Mary not even a month ago. Yeah, that wasn't even a month ago that happened. What a draining season it must be. However, despite the fact that I know the results are what the business is about, wins and losses, and I'm going to contradict myself when we talk about the next game here, when it's all about results, doesn't matter about process, blah, 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 blah. Bears lose this game. Who cares? Because none of this matters, Andy. The only thing that matters, wins and losses don't matter for the Bears right now. Saving Matt Eberflus's job doesn't matter. Who cares? I think everything, all the evidence shows like Eberflus should not be the guy in charge of this team anymore. We got to figure out something else here. So who cares if they win or lose games? All that matters is that Caleb Williams has productive reps down the stretch. And I feel like we got to come out of this game feeling great about that part of it.
Yeah, it's funny. As you can imagine, I follow a handful of Bears fans on social media, and they clearly broke into two camps immediately following this game. There's the folks who came into the season fired up to get like the 6th seed, 7th seed, whatever. Let's get to the playoffs. How do we get to 9 wins, 10 wins, 11 wins? And then there's, I don't know, most of the year, you and I have talked about this. I just want to see Caleb Williams develop. I want confirmation that he is who I think he is, and I want to see him better by the end of the season. I want to see real growth from September to December and January. I felt pretty. I've lived through plenty of losses to the Packers, right? Like this is not like a top 10 loss to the Packers in my experience. I've been through way worse than this. So that didn't really rattle me. I'm pretty thrilled. This was, there's always a voice in your head that is like, oh man, I think this is mostly about the play calling, and I think the coordinator change is going to make a big difference, but I don't know it until I see it. Right. But man, the offense stayed out of, third and forever for most of the game. When they got themselves to third down, it was quite often third and manageable, and they were able to convert. Quick hit stuff. Every time Caleb dropped back to pass, there was an easy button somewhere on the field. It wasn't, 3-4 players running deep, slow developing routes that the Bears can't block, and that, no 2 players actually operating in concert down the field either. Like, this suited their personnel. I think in the first half of this game, the number was 1.92 seconds to throw for Caleb. Man, where has that been? Well, they schemed it up for him. They got him a lot of stuff at or behind the line of scrimmage. They got him a lot of quick hits. They got him a lot of designed runs. They had him proactive as a rusher, even when it wasn't a designed run. To address a point that you and I talked about a few days ago, I also thought that Caleb did a nice job. I think he only hit one of these, but he did a nice job giving his receivers contested opportunities, which he has simply not done. Like, that has not happened since the bye week. He has seemed, at least like to my eye, it seems this way. And I think it's in the numbers too. Like, he's when he misses on some of these throws, he's not putting the ball at risk. He hasn't been getting picked off, but he's missed way over the heads of guys downfield. He's missed way outside way far to the sideline, wide of receivers on outbreaking routes. And that wasn't happening today. Like, he gave guys contested opportunities, didn't really burn them. Eventually, like, they got a couple of huge plays out of it. This was a really, really promising game for Caleb and for Thomas Brown, for the Bears offense generally. It's not the result anybody wants. And I do agree that, like, within the building, it is probably beating them down to have both this loss to, your longtime rival and to have the Hail Mary loss just a few weeks ago. But man, if you're just a fan who is really only interested in the development of Caleb Williams over the course of this season, this was awesome. In fact, it was almost a perfect scenario, right? Because I get to feel really good about Caleb Williams again, and we clearly took another step toward a new coaching staff next year.
Right. Yeah. If you're that type of fan that sees, we'll put it nicely and say, like, sees the big picture, I think you're right. It is a perfect kind of result here. Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of the important points here, and you're right. The back shoulder pass that Caleb completes to Roma Dunze on what should have been the game-winning drive, and it wasn't. How many times has he taken that throw recently? And honestly, it's at the end of the game. Maybe it's because he built up so much confidence throughout the course of the game. I mean, this is a guy that has looked beaten down and unsure of himself through basically every second of every game since the bye week. And this is just, I saw a very different player today. He went 15 of 18 on quick passes, like you mentioned, according to Next Gen Stats. I think Thomas Brown getting that ball out of his hands was a way to alleviate pressure, literally and figuratively. They allowed only 8 pressures on the day, which is the lowest mark of the season. Building that confidence up and keeping the offense moving. Also, I think kind of empowered Caleb Williams. Hey, don't sit back there forever and try to hunt these dumb, long, slow developing routes. If it's not there, like, get out, because they can't install all new route concepts from, Tuesday when they fire Shane Waldron to game time on Sunday. That's just not how football works. So there's a lot of stuff in there that's still the Waldron plays and things like that. So telling him, hey, if it's not there, buddy, take off. 49 yards on scrambles, a career high, totaled 4.63 EPA on those runs. It felt like he was playing loose and decisive, which is really great. So that's good to see, especially if, we're just trying to get something out of the Bears offense, both in real life and in fantasy the rest of the season. Should we talk anything about the team that actually won this game here? It wasn't a perfect outing, I think, for the Packers offense, and Jordan Love specifically had a couple of shaky moments, but overall they do what they do. They win the game in the end because of the blocked field goal, and obviously Jordan Love's scramble touchdown at the end of it. That was a pretty miraculous play.
Yeah, should have hit Tucker Kraft on the interception. That's just a ball that sailed. I always think Josh Jacobs is awesome in his own unique way, but I thought he was really great today as a receiver. He was good, and I get that it's always a different Green Bay receiver. Christian Watson was kind of the difference in this game. He just made some plays that were absolute field flipping, game changing, drive saving plays, right? And ended up being the difference. The final one was just an absolutely sensational catch. He only catches 4 balls on 4 targets, 150 yards. A couple of them were just, one of them was double coverage, and it's pretty rare. Like, I don't know, it's kind of disrespectful when you're a receiver and you do the thing where the hand goes up right away, right? And when you've got somebody on your hip or whatever, he did it in a double coverage situation. Like, he did it with like a guy on either side of him, put the hand up in the air and called for the ball and got it, and frickin' mossed 2 dudes. So it was just a reminder. And again, it's not going to be there for Christian Watson every week, but he is just athletically, he is unlike anybody else in the Packers receiving core. And I still think Jayden Reed is great. And I think Jayden Reed is the guy that if you have to have one of these guys on a roster for the rest of the season, it's probably Jayden Reed that you want. Christian Watson is 6'4" with 4.3 speed and a crazy vertical, and there's just not a lot of guys like him walking around the league.
And he ran the third most routes on the team today. Coming out of the bye, I think there might be some signal in that. 18 for Romeo Doubs, 18 for Tucker Kraft, and then 15 for Christian Watson. So Dontavian Wicks just 6 routes on the day, and he didn't see any. He saw 1 target, no catches in this one. So yeah, that might be some signal for Christian Watson there. Let's move on to the next game here. Colts 28, Jets 27. I think the big story for this one is that Anthony Richardson plays pretty well. I just said in the last thing that results, let me poo-poo the results here for Chicago. Let me talk about just results and not process for the Colts, because I think the Colts messaging and sort of the way they've kind of communicated this Anthony Richardson benching has been confusing at best and made them the target for very easy jokes. But still, from a results perspective, you get Anthony Richardson's best game of the season. The week he gets reinserted into the starting lineup against a Jets team that's not as good as defense is not as good as it should be, but still is not like a pushover unit. 9.73 adjusted yards per attempt for Richardson is his best since week 1. And this one, watching it, was not inflated by big plays and things like that.
Right.
It's a really good moment for Anthony Richardson here.
Yeah, there were a couple of 30-yard completions in this one, but you're right. There wasn't just some like 75-yard touchdown that produced half the passing yards. I think the most notable aspect of this, and it's easy to point to Richardson's fantasy line and be like, oh man, we're back in business. Couple of rushing touchdowns, passing touchdown. But there could have been a scenario where he has a big fantasy line and you still don't feel great about any of these receivers moving forward. But he completed 20 balls. 20 for 30 through the air. Matt, this is the second time in his NFL career he has completed 20 passes in a game. He has not done it since his first start. In his previous 3 starts, in the 3 previous games that he actually started and finished for the Colts, he completed 10 passes in each of those. And it's just not possible to support like a viable fantasy receiver if you're completing 10, 12 passes a game. We just, we can all feel good about Josh Downs and he's really talented, but if the quarterback's completing 10 balls a game, that we can't start anybody. But this was an offense where we can really believe in the receivers, and they all had moments. Pittman comes back and he was pretty good. Josh Downs was great. Pierce had a moment. A.D. Mitchell had a moment. I don't know, if we're completing 20 passes a game, that now we can feed all those mouths. So I thought that was really promising.
Absolutely, yeah. And the fact that he did this under the most pressure from a percentage wise that any quarterback faced in week 11 was impressive. The running game, 2.4 yards per carry for Jonathan Taylor. Pretty good moment here for Anthony Richardson. On the other side, just another miserable moment in what's been a long and this whole season has felt long for the Jets, and somehow it feels like what we have left is longer than what we have gone through for New York, which I think says all that you need to know about how this team feels right now, because more games have happened than will happen for the New York Jets. And yet, like I said, I just feel like the rest of the season is going to feel so long for the 3-8 New York Jets. Anything to say on this team, or, God.
I feel like there might still be a handful of people holding on to the idea that this Jets defense is something, and I don't know, they gave up another 28 points. That's not happening, right? I don't know. You can't trust the defense. Nice game for Breece Hall. A handful of people still got their numbers. Aaron Rodgers somehow ends up with basically the same stat line every game. He's just going to give us 200 yards and 2 touchdowns for the rest of the year and not look good doing it. And they're gonna lose either in horrific fashion, or they're gonna lose narrowly, but they are gonna lose.
Couldn't have said it any better myself. All right, let's move on to the next game here. Rams 28, Patriots 22. This is also kind of like a classic Patriots game this year, where you feel pretty good about what Drake May shows you. Obviously, you just come away from every single game thinking, my God, can we get this guy starting receiver? I think some of these guys can play and can be part of the rotation, but for God's sakes, we're talking about Kayshon Boutte running like every single route as the X receiver for this offense. And Pop Douglas, what can he do? Just get him one receiver, and also he's going to make a couple of boneheaded mistakes along the way. He has a fumble in this one. He has an interception in this one. So it's a classic Patriots game. And on the other side, the Rams might be like when we're doing all these shows, Andy, and we're pulling up box scores and things like that, we've talked about the Chiefs having these long box scores. We talk about even just the Colts, and they got a lot of guys the ball in the last game. The damn Rams have 3 players carry the ball. 4 of them are Matthew Stafford kneel downs or whatever. I mean, he has 4 rush attempts for 3 kneel downs and 1 rush for 3 yards. So he totals 4 carries for 0 yards. Otherwise, it's all Kyron Williams and Blake Corum. In the passing game, 6 guys get targets. I mean, it's just that they are the most constricted offense, the tightest offense in the NFL.
There are literally 8 names on the offensive side of the box score for the Rams. That's all we got. Those are the only people touching the ball. I thought Stafford was awesome. I mean, you can watch the most random, otherwise forgettable Rams game at any point, and you'll still see Matt Stafford make 5 throws that are just unbelievable. He's super fun to watch. The touchdown in this game was it to Parkinson? That was
sick.
That's just a great throw. What a fun player to watch. I think on the other side, if you're a Patriots fan, this was sort of, as you say, another one of those just great proof of concept games for Drake May. If we get this guy a legit number 1 receiver, it's going to look a whole lot different. He's got so much rushing juice. The arm is great. You've got a few years to sort of iron out the occasional boneheaded throws and misfires. But man, the tools are definitely there. I thought it was a promising game for him. Ramondre, great. I don't know. But mostly my takeaway from this is that, man, Stafford at his age, just an absolute joy to watch.
Yeah, when he is protected. Because coming into when he's protected, coming into this game, he was the worst rated passer under pressure. And that's kind of my thing coming out of this game. The Patriots blitzed him on 44% of his dropbacks, and he was under pressure on just 22%. So the math is not mathing there in terms of their plan. So Stafford just absolutely he got rid of the ball quickly and got rid of it downfield. So how many defenses can he do that against? They play the Eagles next week. I think that's going to be a bigger proof. Talk about proof of concept, for the LA Rams and how far their offense can go, and can they make up ground in the NFC West and things like that. That game right there will be a big one, because that Eagles defense looks pretty sweet at this point.
Yeah.
All right. Final game that we sort of care about here, and I feel like we just had to include this one, even though it's an absolute blowout. Broncos 38, Falcons 6. It would feel disrespectful to Bo Nix to put his, statement game. Is this the Bo Nix statement game in this game could be an email, because he was terrific in this game. Over 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, and at least watching it on broadcast, maybe on film it's different. It felt like earned yardage for Bo Nix in this one.
Yeah, thank God he had a great game, because otherwise this game would be the Audric Estime fiasco, and we don't need to talk about that at all. Nix was awesome. 28 for 33. There were a lot of, and I credit this to Sean Payton, there were a lot of layups in this, at least from what I saw in this game. A lot of stuff that was schemed up really smartly. They hit that. They used Marvin Mims out of the backfield a bunch, and they hit him on that wheel route out of the backfield early, and that popped. And then they used that same look and that same route to clear space for other stuff later in the game. I thought that was really, I don't know. I thought Sean Payton called himself a hell of a game, and Nix just didn't miss. He had some incompletions. He only had 5 incompletions in this one, but he put the ball on receivers on a bunch of those incompletions. He was throwing darts. They were great. So he made all the easy throws. And then when you had to ask him to make a difficult throw downfield or thread it between coverage, he did it. He was just on fire. He was terrific. And this is 2 games in a row now. This game was obviously better than his previous effort, but this is 2 games in a row when he put up a number for fantasy managers without really running the ball at all. So he didn't need the rushing cheat code in this one. And when you think about his development, especially, last year, I was not watching Oregon football constantly, so I wasn't as plugged into what a Bo Nix was doing. So I've kind of been learning him through the summer and in the fall. For him to come from where he was in September to where he was today that's just phenomenal development of a player. And that's a huge credit to him. He was he was terrific. And again, he was terrific for fantasy purposes without even running the ball. And we know that's there. We know that in any given matchup, he can run for 50 or 60 yards. Really exciting. And then they have, they do still have their bye coming up, which is kind of a nuisance. But they have a really friendly schedule over the next month or so.
Yeah, and look, at times this year it looked rough for Bo Nix. There's no to start the year, but he was rookie. He's a rookie.
September was pretty bad. The first couple starts were pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's okay to say that and then also acknowledge now that I think he looks really good executing this offense. And he seems like he has a full grasp of it. It seems like they've cut concepts out that don't make as much sense for Bo Nix, which is just good coaching for Sean Payton. And he's another guy that let's get him another starting receiver besides Cortland Sutton and see what happens. I mean, they've got some interesting role players on this team. They're starting to do kind of some creative stuff with Marvin Mims, is like involved in the run game and kind of being eye candy. Devon Vele looks like he's got a little something. His buddy Troy Franklin pops up for a play every 4 weeks. So that's interesting. And, but again, let's get this guy another starting receiver and see what happens. I'm interested in the Bo Nix experience. We've got one review on the podcast, which, by the way, would love some more reviews. Okay. 5 stars only. You can talk shit about me. You can talk shit about Andy. You can talk shit about any of us, but as long as you do it, leaving a 5-star review. Tell me I'm an absolute moron, but only if you leave a 5-star review. If you don't want to leave a 5-star review, you can tell me I'm a moron on Twitter. That's fine. Find me on one of the other social platforms. I won't see it there. But if you tell me I'm a moron on Twitter, I will absolutely see it. Anyways, Harmon had some guest on that thinks Bo Nix is like a top 5 quarterback. He's really losing threads on what to talk about on the podcast. Yeah, I've seen the reviews. I don't remember this person who thought Bo Nix was a top 5 prospect, but if they did, they got to be taking a pretty good victory lap right now. Bo Nix looks pretty damn good at this point. So I'm interested in the development of Bo Nix and what we get going forward. And just one thing on the Audric Estime stuff, Golem, our guy. Andy, look. That's terrible stuff by you, but okay. Audric Estime Golem hurdled a dude in this game.
Seriously, yeah.
And listen, we did try to put this out there that there were some limitations to his game, and it's Sean Payton. This might be the most obvious rug pull of any rug pull in fantasy football ever. When he's not playing at all in the first half, and Javonte Williams is. I mean, if you started him, it's fine. You don't have to hurt yourself over it. It's whatever. It's okay. There were plenty of signals sending that he was a decent start, but I don't think anybody was telling you this guy was about to be the next league winner. That's for sure.
Yeah. Right. No, that's fair. It was for a very long period of time in this game. He was sitting on 2 touches for -2 yards, which the final line, thanks to the fact that it was junior varsity rosters on both sides by the end of this game, the final line looked a little bit better. But this was definitely the Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin show for most of it. Also, should mention Javonte Williams being literally carried into the end zone by his teammates. That was one of my favorite touchdowns of the week.
Yeah, it was his revenge game touchdown against Sean Payton, his own coach, for Javonte Williams. I don't really have anything to say on the Falcons except the Broncos defense is really, really good. So not surprising that they got kind of taken to task a little bit on this one. But a couple of sick Bijan Robinson and Drake London moments come out of this one, but that's about it. With that, we gave Bo Nix his due. He is not an email game, but we do have 4 games that could have been an email we got to talk about on the other side. Let's get to that right after this quick break. All right, we're back. Andy, we've got 4 games that could have been an email, starting with Dolphins 34, Raiders 19. I think the email subject line in this one is the Dolphins had the game on offense that we kind of needed to see this week.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It ended up being, kind of the Jonnu Smith game, 6 catches, 101 yards. A hilariously wide open touchdown for him. Great game overall for him. Daniel said after the game that, man, you pay too much attention to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and that's what you're going to get. So impressive performance by him. Another big game from Devon Achane. He goes over 100 total yards again. He was good. 2 of 3 touchdowns. Tyreek 7 catch. 7 catches for 60-something yards and a touchdown should be a half of football for Tyreek Hill based on the way he was producing last year. It's what he finishes with in this one, but I'll take it. The guy's playing through injury right now, and a little part of me is concerned that, we probably need the Dolphins to keep winning in order for Tyreek to keep playing while he's dealing with this wrist issue.
No, it's a really good point. Yeah. In my care, don't care recap column, I'm writing a section about how I don't care about the concern over the Dolphins wide receiver duo because, it's like you said it perfectly. You pay too much attention to Tyreek Hill. You pay too much attention to Jalen Waddle. Well, Jonnu Smith's going to run a route on 94.6% of the dropbacks, average 9.8 yards after the catch per reception, and every single one of his catches went for a first down or touchdown in this game. He has actually been hyper efficient all season long.
Yeah.
And look, if you're going to be a bad defense like the Raiders, and you're going to leave a guy open. Good. I mean, the Dolphins have needed some counter punches beyond these two wide receivers. It just stinks for Jalen Waddle in fantasy, but I mean, I don't think we put him in the coping corner yet, but he's probably going to be put in the coping corner on tomorrow's podcast officially. And on the Raiders side, my two things here with the Raiders in the email is, one, Jacoby Myers leads the team in rushing with 1 carry for 20 yards. So that's pretty pathetic. I think Alexander Madison and Zamir White were both hurt at different times in this game. Madison, I think, was ruled out at one point. We got Amir Abdullah action. And Brock Bowers is going to turn. He's like, the Giants were running a fantasy usage scam for Malik Neighbors at the beginning of the season. The Raiders are now fully running a fantasy usage scam for Brock Bowers. And I mean, what else are they good for at this point? Go for it.
Yeah, 16 targets. He catches 13 of them. He is, especially with the injury to Kittle, good chance for Brock Bowers to surge ahead to maybe overall tight end 1 status at some point here. He's pretty clearly going to lead the position in catches, in targets. I mean, there's no impediment to that right now as long as he stays healthy. He is easily the most dangerous weapon that they have in the passing game.
Next game that could have been an email: Saints 35, Browns 14. Producer Colin actually summed this up really well, but I'm going to add on to it. Colin said that his notes on this game was this was a manifestation of all the Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill memes. Jameis Winston goes over 390 yards and 2 touchdowns in a loss, of course. Meanwhile, Taysom Hill scores 40 fantasy points with 138 yards on the ground, 3 freaking touchdowns. He also threw 2 passes,
threw a pick.
Threw a pick.
Lost a fumble.
But I'd also argue this was the damn MVS meme game too, and he's basically just been the MVS meme as soon as he got to New Orleans. So memes all around for this game.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw I think it was the Saints that posted it. The receiving line waiting to greet Jameis Winston after this game on the Saint coaches, players, absolutely loving him. Everybody with an extended hug. That was wild. It was like a wedding scene. It was crazy. He passes the ball another 46 times. Jameis is just going to throw it 40 plus times the rest of the year. And it's not always going to work out, and it's not always going to be a clinic, but he is fully capable of supporting all of these receivers. This is a low key good week, by the way, for some of your pet receivers, because Elijah Moore gets home in this one. Curtis Samuel had a day. This is a good week for you. This is a good week for the reception perception brand, I think. I'm delighted by the Taysom Hill game because I have Taysom Hill starting in a lot of places. Weeks ago, I gave up on the tight end position in a bunch of places, and so I've just got. It's not going to be like this every week, obviously, with Taysom, and it's totally cheating because he's mostly a running back, I think. I wouldn't really argue too hard that he's a tight end, but who cares? You're just parking him in that tight end spot the rest of the season. He's probably going to finish top 5 at the position.
Yeah, we were probably a Rashad Bateman touchdown away from the reception perception Discord having to be shut down for too many pants off victory laps. I'll say that. But too bad Jahan Dotson didn't get his revenge on Thursday night. Then we really would have been in for something. All right, I think that's a good chance to move on to the next game here, which is Vikings 23, Titans 13. Gonna be honest with you guys, putting this one in this section, not because it was a bad game or whatever. It's just definitely the game I saw the least of in the 1 p.m. window. And when the NFL has freaking 8 games in the early window, and a lot of them are some pretty consequential games that we need to get eyes on, and then 3 freaking games in the late window, somebody's gonna have to hold the L. And unfortunately that was Minnesota in this one. So Andy, I don't have too much to say on this. Do you got anything?
A lot of action for Cam Akers in this one, right? 10 carries. He scores a touchdown in it. So we'll see if that persists. This is, I feel like this was the game that Sam Darnold needed. He needed he needed a proof of concept game. He needed a get right game. Call it whatever you want to. But it's been a rough go in too many of the recent starts. So this was a good effort for him against a pretty frisky Tennessee defense. On the Tennessee side, they just got nothing on the ground. Absolutely nothing on the ground. Levis led the team in rushing. They got the weekly touchdown out of Westbrook Akine on, again, like on only 2 receptions. So he's just impossible. If you write a pickups column in fantasy, he's just impossible because and MVS is the same way. They keep scoring and they barely see any targets and they barely catch any balls, but they always find the end zone.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I said on FFL, I can't remember if it was on air or off air, that I could see Will Levis either throwing 5 picks and or taking 5 sacks against the Vikings. Got one of them. He did take 5 sacks. So, all right, with that, let's move on to the final game here, which at one point, honestly, I tweeted something to this effect. Yeah, I mean, this game was inappropriate. It should not have been shown on television. Lions 52, Jaguars 6. This stat from Hayden Winks is pretty incredible. Biggest single game yardage differences in NFL history. Number 1, the 1976 Rams had 488 yards over their opponent. The 1979 Rams had 482 yards over their opponent. And the 2024 Lions had 475 yards more than the Jaguars in this game. And it, like the outrageous stats go on and on and on and on from this contest. I mean, did they score on every single drive? At one point, the Lions had scored on every single drive. Like I said, this was just
and touchdowns too, not just like scoring, but nothing but touchdowns for like 7 straight drives. Yeah.
The box score is like bananas. You know, Jared Goff threw 5 picks last week. There's 4 touchdowns, goes over 400 yards. I mean, it was crazy. And in a game leading into it where I don't know why. And you know, by the time you're listening to this, Doug Peterson might not have a job anymore, because that was the talking point all Sunday morning was, oh yeah, Doug Peterson. If they lose to the Lions with friggin' Mac Jones at quarterback, you know, and a bunch of dudes hurt, Doug Peterson might get fired by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Well, I mean, shoot, if I'm Doug Peterson, my team just lost 52-6. And by the way, I'm Doug Peterson. I might want to get fired from this job.
Yeah. That was the cruelest and most unnecessary series of articles and headlines that I thought we saw all week. Like, man, Doug Peterson needing to get this win against this opponent with that quarterback in order to retain a job was just a wild scenario. Never going to happen. This game had the vibe of, like, you know, the SEC school that invites the tiny school and gives them $500,000 to show up in their building and just take a beating. That is what this felt like. It was never competitive. It was never going to be competitive. I don't know how many Jaguars we can trust rest of season. We'll see what they are coming out of the bye. There's 6 teams on bye next week, by the way. It's a terrible bye week, and they're one of them. And when they come out of it, I don't know, is Trevor Lawrence back at quarterback? Who's coaching this team? What is anything going to look like? But I'm not totally sure that we can trust any Jaguars in fantasy rest of season.
No. If you started Brian Thomas in this one, you should feel, I mean, his team lost 52-6 and he had 82 yards. You should feel lucky that he came away with that 82 yards. And there's going to be uglier moments than that. That's for sure. So yeah, just again, like I said, it felt inappropriate for a daytime television audience to see this. I'm not that I wanted to see this on, you know, Sunday night or Monday Night Football, but I mean, my God, yeah, this is pretty brutal for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And yeah, the Detroit Lions are great, and I think they're probably the best team in football right now. Any awards you want to give out here? I know you wanted to give one to Chris Boswell. I think WTF of the week, we got like 50 of those in the damn Saints game. So I don't know what more to add there.
I think maybe I shouldn't say, I'm a Bears fan. I shouldn't say respectful things about the Packers, but as people know, I am very fond of Josh Jacobs. And he had, I don't know if you saw it today, he had a reception, nice little run after catch. And I can't remember for the life of me which defensive back this was, but he picks out a Chicago defensive back while he's like going toward the sideline, gonna finish the play, like eyes him and gives him one of these, like gives him like a come here kind of, do you really want some of this, with the finger, and just lays him out, just sticks a shoulder into him, lays him out, steps out of bounds. It was one of the most vicious things that I saw anybody do on Sunday, and he did it to my team.
I'll give you the award of the bigger man, you know, because I give you a chance to give an award to anybody in the NFL. You could take another, you know, victory lap, or you take another lap for the Chris Boswell stuff, and instead you're talking about how Josh Jacobs, you know, obliterated your team, which is good
so
stuff.
good.
That makes you the bigger person, Andy Behrens, and that's why we love you. Well, that is going to do it, Andy. Appreciate the hell you. What a great Sunday of football this was.
Really great. This was terrific. Tough news for anybody who had been disrespecting or hating on the NFL coming into this week, because this was just awesome.
Yeah, I mean, man, great job for the NFL. The plucky underdogs just really sticking it to the haters. Real counterculture product there, the National Football League. Well, that is going to do it. As I said, on Tuesday, Dalton Del Don joins me for the post-week 11 People's Panic Meter. So please send in your panic to the fantasy mailbag. That is fantasymailbag@yahoosports.com. So many good, fun, moments from week 11, but I don't want to hear about fun moments. I want to hear about what made you miserable. So sound off to fantasymailbag@yahoosports.com, or find the post on Twitter and get after it there. That's going to do it for today. Until tomorrow with Dalton, we are out.